new technology in the last 10 minutes, so we're going to hope it works. I tend to wander a bit. Where's my field of view to stay in your...
It's
right?
towards the middle.
I'll stay sort of here.
Yep.
I'm just going to flick that and see if it's working. Excellent. So please ignore my phone. I'm not ignoring you. It's just oh crap. Now I've just disconnected. That was good. Oh button. It's the only way I can get this to click through. So let me just double check that that's going to do it again. I'm not just disconnected. Yes, perfect. Okay, so thank you very much to the Yarloop Community Resource Centre for having me today. I am from Oldbury Equine Clinic, so we are an equine-only practice. Unfortunately, we don't service this far south, but you are always welcome to come up to us. That's no trouble at all. But I got invited to come and speak here today about the issues that we're having from this long dry season that we've had and associated health issues with that. So a little bit about me. So I started riding when I was 3. I went to my first hack show when I was 3 and a half. Then joined Pony Club and continued hacking, and then went on to do eventing and mounted games and all those sorts of things. I took a bit of a step back through university. 6 years of uni is a bit of a long slog, and I just couldn't sort of do the horses and the uni thing. But I continued to instruct at Pony Club, and then after graduation I've continued to be involved in both Pony Club and EA and FEI. So we are really passionate about supporting the equine industry that obviously supports us. So we like to provide services for equestrian events. We love giving talks, we love doing our own talks. We're big on education, and you're always more than welcome to contact us with any questions that you might have. So I was not... Okay, we're going to have some issues with my talk today because MacBook has eaten my formatting, but that's okay, we'll roll with it. So I was asked to give this talk, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to talk about, and then I started putting the lecture together, and hopefully we've got enough time. So, we'll see how we go. But what are the issues that we've had? Well, we've had a really long, dry season. We've had such a long period without pasture cover that it's given our horses a really long time to accumulate sand and crystals in their gut. We then had quite a heavy break to the season, but we've really had very little follow-up rain to that break in the season. And it was so late in the season that it also coincided with the temperature drop. So we've had very little pasture regrowth happening to actually cover up that ground that we've got. The long dry season meant we've come really short with hay because everybody's had to keep feeding for so long. And of course the problem is, just because the season's broken doesn't mean that problem has gone away, because we're not going to have hay for another 4 to 6 months before it can grow and mature and be cut and baled and dry and all of those sorts of things. So this isn't an issue that is readily going away for us, and so it's quite a problem that we've got. So what issues... Wow, that's really killed my formatting. Okay, we'll go with it. MacBooks, I love them. So what are the problems from this? Well, as I said, sand accumulation. Horses are fantastic at sifting sand out into their gut and having it settle. They're just absolutely wonderful at it. Don't know why. Keeps us in the job, but it's not really great for you guys. So what does sand accumulation cause? Well, colic, of course, is the big one, but it can also cause scouring or just poor performance, weight loss, those kinds of things as well. But there's a few other conditions that I think it's worth mentioning that are more related to the feed issues that we've got. So a lot of horses have gone from pasture and meadow hay and now going back onto oats and wheatens and those sorts of things. And there are risk problems with those, and we'll cover those today. So the main ones for me are laminitis and EMS. So has anybody here got a laminitic pony that they've had to manage before? Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, right? It's a nightmare. And you know, when you're restricted on what you can physically buy and purchase, that's really hard, right? Dental decay is all related to feed primarily, so that is a big risk factor for us. And you can't really see that, it's disappeared, but gastric ulceration. So that's another big issue for us. So colic, there is a question there. So what is colic? Very good. Somebody's had this question before. So most of the time I get people go, oh, it's sand, oh, it's a twist, right? pain in the abdomen, right? Now the problem with that is, wow, okay, I'm really sorry, this isn't showing up very nicely for you guys. Bummer. Okay, I will just have to talk to it maybe. So, the problem with colic is that any organ in the abdomen can cause colic, right? So that's the intestines, the stomach, the cecum, the liver, the spleen, the kidneys, the reproductive organs, all of those can result in colic, okay? So our job is to work out for you what's causing the pain, okay? So just because your horse is colicking doesn't mean, oh, it's got sand, or oh, it's got a twist, or it's got an impaction, okay? We need to work out what's causing that issue for you. So obviously we're talking about sand accumulation today causing colic. That is probably its primary risk factor for you guys, but of course it can also result in scours. So the sand acts like sandpaper on the intestines, right? And so that prevents them from absorbing their food properly, so you can have weight loss associated with that. But it also means the food doesn't digest properly, and so you end up with these scoury, watery kind of horses. So how do we diagnose sand? Any ideas? Because you can't see the list. You have to answer the questions now.
Manure flows.
Yep. So sand sediment in manure. Anything else? Listening. So auscultation. Somebody said ultrasound. Yep.
X-ray.
X-ray. Right. So any ideas what the problem is with fecal sand sediment? You know, the glove test.
Can't get deep enough.
No. So
when you're doing.
So we're not removing it rectally. We'll do rectals if they're colicking and we're checking for impactions and checking organs and things. But we're just talking about past manure.
You might not be picking it up.
Yeah, right. So the sand problem is because it has accumulated in the gut. It has settled out and isn't passing through. So just because there's no sand in the manure doesn't mean there isn't sand in the gut, right? So we don't use that anymore. Auscultation, so listening with the stethoscope, is great. Unfortunately, even for the best of us, it's not very reliable. So we have just seen that many sand colics this season. All three of our primary vets, Mike, Simone and I, we've been listening to guts and we go, oh, yes, it's definitely got sand. And then we x-ray it, it's got this pilly little thing. Or we go, it doesn't really sound like it's got sand, and we x-ray it, full of it, right? So it's not super sensitive, that test. Ultrasound can be useful. But again, the problem with ultrasound is that ultrasound doesn't penetrate dense materials, so like minerals and stuff, so it doesn't penetrate bone. It also doesn't penetrate sand. So it can tell us that it's there, but it won't tell us how much is there, okay? So the key is X-ray. X-ray tells us if it's present, it tells us how, in general, how much is there, and it gives us a clear response to treatment that we can monitor, okay? So what does that look like? Well, I'm supposed to have a laser pointer, but I don't know how that's supposed to work on this, so I should use this one. So, these are two x-rays of horses we've had recently. So, this is the bottom of the body wall here, okay, down here. This is the normal colour of normal gut contents, okay? So, just full of food and ingesta and fat and organs and bits and pieces. This sort of turd-looking thing, that is sand. That is sand that is accumulated in the bottom of the large colon. This one, all of this is sand. Okay? Now, that's a 500 kilo horse, right? This is an x-ray of the abdomen. You can imagine that's that much sand at least. We actually can't see the upper limit of it on this x-ray because we can't get
How old is that horse and what is it?
Yeah, so that King is mid-teens thoroughbred, pleasure horse. Yeah. So these are large, like kilograms and kilograms of sand that has accumulated in their gut, right? So we have to try and get rid of that. So, everybody's heard of tubing a horse, right? Drenching, nasogastric intubation. That is obviously the key way of removing it. Who here has done annual or biannual oil drenches to keep sand under control? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to debug that myth. It doesn't really do much. It's a nice idea and it's probably better than nothing, But certainly once we get to accumulations like that, a one-off drench ain't touching the sides of that, okay? So we generally need to do repeated drenching programs to get these horses cleared out. That might be once or twice a day, and it might be for 3 to 7 days. We actually had one that was in 8 days just recently in hospital, and even then it still had traces of sand at the end, so we put on some silly afterwards. But my point is that a single drench, even in a preventative scenario, isn't likely to be enough to necessarily clear out the sand burden. So we have to be mindful of that. So what are we going to use for drenching? Any ideas? Paraffin oil? Yeah.
Psyllium.
Psyllium? Yeah. Somebody said Epsom salts. I heard Epsom salts. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so when there seems to be this sort of misconception that's come up, because of course we run around, we're busy, and we talk about an oil drench, right? Seems to get lost in translation quite frequently with horse owners, and they go, oh yes, well I'll give it vegetable oil routinely, and that'll help keep the sand under control. The problem is, paraffin oil is a petroleum-based oil, and it doesn't get absorbed by the intestines. That's the whole point, right? It's going to go through, emulsify the sand, and they're going to shit it out the other end, right? Vegetable oil is plant-based, right? So it is broken down by the gut. It doesn't actually go all the way through, so it's not going to provide any clearance of sand, okay? So A, you giving vegetable oil isn't going to help, and B, even if you're giving paraffin oil, the quantities you're going to get by syringing it into their mouth isn't going to touch the sides, okay? We're giving between 3 to 5 litres a day, not 3 to 500 mils, 3 to 5 litres per day, okay? There's no way you can syringe that into a horse without it killing you or you killing it, right? It's just not going to happen, okay? So, psyllium husks, very, very useful. So they're a great fibre bulker, right? So I'm sure many of you have played with them before and you've mixed it with water and it turns into this horrible kid's glue paste and it's just gross and disgusting. Well, it does that in the stomach, right? So it forms this gelatinous substance that, again, emulsifies the sand and goes all the way through. We try to use it in its raw form because it has two modes of action there. You've got the physical scooping of those little husks and that gelatinous goo that it forms with the larger plant material. So we try to put it through. We have all blocked nasogastric tubes trying to put psyllium into horses. It's just a nightmare. The thing we won't do is we won't use it in a colicking horse. Okay? It runs the risk of making that colic worse, and we can bind them up. So if you've got a colicking sand accumulation horse, we will generally reach for oil and Epsom salts until that horse has stopped colicking, and then we will follow up with a course of oil and psyllium to get them cleared out. The final thing is Epsom salts. So magnesium sulfate, it is literally a laxative. Okay? It is just to help increase gut motility and movement of ingesta. All right? There has been a small study that's been done that's shown that it works synergistically with psyllium and Epsom salts together. So we tend to try and put the two together if we can. But that's its main purpose. So often what we'll do in hospital, if we've got horses that are coming to stay for us, we do a morning drench of oil, psyllium and Epsom salts, and then we do an afternoon drench of water and Epsom salts. Okay? And that is the protocol that we've been seeing the most efficacy with, based on our pre and post radiographs of sand clearance. Okay? If you can't bring a horse into us and we're having to do it in the field, we'll generally just do it once a day with oil, psyllium and Epsom salts. But bear in mind that's probably going to be more expensive because we're travelling out every day. And of course it's not as efficacious because you're not getting that second drench into your horse. So, of course, if we're treating a horse, we need to measure if that's working or not. Right. So, this is the first horse. This is King, 7th of June this year. This was his sand. Yeah? This is King on the 14th of June after spending, well, it would have been 5 days of drenching for King, but it fell over a weekend, so he was with us for 7 days. That's all that's left. Okay?
How often were you doing that?
Twice a day. Right?
Can you over oil? Use too much oil?
Well, you can, so in terms of in one sitting, Yeah, so we are restricted by the volume of the stomach in terms of how much we can put in at one drench. Okay? So the fluid volume of the stomach is maximum around 9 litres in a 5 kilo horse, right? 500 kilo horse. So we can't put more than that volume in or we risk rupturing the stomach, right? We have to take into account there's usually some food and ingesta in that stomach when we're tubing it, right? So we've been pushing it with these horses by putting in 5 litres of oil, 500 grams of psyllium, 2 litres of water and 500 grams of Epsom salts. Like that is the absolute maximum we would do in one sitting, okay? Yeah, if you put 10 litres of oil in that horse, you're going to rupture the stomach and kill it, and not in a very pleasant way, I might add. So yes, we are restricted, and that's why we're talking about doing repeated drenching, twice a day for several days, so that we can get enough product into that horse to clear it
I
out.
know you said how much you put in, but if there's a sand accumulation there, how do you know how much oil to put in then if there's that much sand? You can't put all that oil in, surely.
So this isn't sitting in the stomach, this is sitting in the large colon.
Right,
Okay, so we're only putting our products into the stomach. Okay, so that's generally not got sand in it. And we've scoped enough horses to know that there's not sand sitting in the stomach. The sand seems to move through the stomach, through the small intestine, and then settles out somewhere between the cecum, large colon, and rectum. Okay, it sits in these saculations of the large colon and settles out. So the small intestine's only about that big. Okay, it's not a very big space. There's nowhere for it to really stop in its transit through that. The large colon is about this round. Okay, so it's got plenty of space in there for the ingesta to go over the top and the sand to settle out. Okay, so this is why X-rays are so important, right? Because we can measure our response here. Okay, we've got no other way of knowing if we've been successful in clearing that sand out of our horse. Okay, and even then we go, we've still got a little bit in here, so we tend to follow these horses up with psyllium at home. So what do we do with these horses for maintenance and prevention? So who's heard of milk and honey?
Yeah.
Yeah? Heard boiled pumpkin. I can't remember if it's boiled or roast pumpkin.
Boiled.
Boiled pumpkin, yeah.
Roasted or so.
Chia seeds?
Yeah.
Yeah? Right, so these are all home remedies that people will use to try and clear sand, right? What the fuck's milk and honey going to do? Seriously, people, I mean, maybe give it the shits, but really, it's not going to do anything. And the quantities you're putting in is just useless, right? So milk and honey, it's just out, right? The gut's going to absorb what it can absorb, right? Honey is sugar, right? Milk, they may have struggled with some of the proteins in that, but the rest is just going to get broken down and absorbed by the gut, right? Same with boiled pumpkin, right? Yes, it's going to be a bit of a fibre bulk, maybe, but again, it's a plant product, right? Their guts are designed to break that down. We want stuff that's going to go all the way through, right? Now, chia seeds aren't necessarily a bad thing, but two problems with them is one, you're never feeding enough, right? When we're talking about psyllium in a sec, we're talking about 500 grams a day, half a kilo, right? Most people are putting a couple of spoons of chia seeds in, right? It's not going to touch the sides. The other problem is that most people, when they're doing that, they're feeding it every day, okay? So what the gut is going to do when you feed that every day is it's going to develop the bacteria to break it down. So again, the gut is just going to process those chia seeds and they're not going to act as a clearing product, okay? So the product that we use is psyllium, okay? We use 1 gram per kilogram, and we do that for both treatment and prevention, which is for a 500 kilo horse, 500 grams a day, okay? We feed that for 5 to 7 days per day, once a month. So 1 week off, English, 1 week on, 3 weeks off. Why?
So the gut doesn't adapt to it.
Yeah, correct, right? So the gut's only exposed to it for a short period of time, so the psyllium can clear out the sand, but it doesn't develop the gut bacteria to break it down. There's no point feeding psyllium all the time. It's the same problem as chia seeds. Okay? So that is our prevention program for sand, and we'll often follow up our drenching protocols with a course of psyllium if we've had these large sand accumulation courses. Yeah? Any questions on sand? Let's cover a little bit more. No. A, it's probably not enough, and B, they're giving, the gut's just going to break it down. Yeah. We have used Metamucil in the past to chew, because it's easy to chew, right, because it's been micronized.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I found this out when we started doing that, because we were looking at how much volume we were giving. It's a third to half sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Third to half sugar. It's nuts. So yeah, we've moved away from. We literally buy 20 kilo bags now from a company in Sydney of psyllium, and we just use it that way. All right, so that's our sand problem. So how am I doing to try? Yeah, I'm doing well. Plenty.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
So you're talking about the psyllium, and I know through talking to lots of people that trying to get that volume of psyllium down any horse is difficult. So obviously a lot of people are resorting to the sand flush or the inside out.
Oh,
so,
no, what about
so
Haven't edited ones.
yeah.
Sure. So, I'm going to talk about them sort of at the end.
Okay, so
But it's a good question now, because I'm sure everybody else in the room is thinking it, right? So, part of the problem with some of the pelleted products is, if you think about it, you've micronized the product, right? So you've lost any scooping action of the physical husk, and then some of the products are steam pressed to get them in those pellet forms. Now again, you're steaming them, you're pre-activating that psyllium with water, right? So they've never been my preference, and totally ignore the feeding recommendations on the tub. It's just never enough, right? It's normally like 60 grams or something when you look at those tubs. It's just not going to do anything, right? So if some horses will eat plain dry psyllium. They're just weird and they'll eat it. Others, it's amazing how they can sift it out of their feet. Like, it is just a spectacular skill. You can mix it with molasses just to make it more palatable, and that sticky molasses is fine. It doesn't pre-activate the psyllium. The product that we now stock and recommend is called In Sand Out.
Yeah, they hate it.
Hates it? Right, okay.
Yeah.
So the thing with the In Sand Out is, yes, it's micronized and pelleted, but it's it's cold pressed, so it's not steamed, and it also contains Epsom salts, so theoretically working together for your horses. Again, ignore the bag, because I think the prevention dose is like a third or half of what we use. We just use the treatment dose all the time for your programs. So I would try plain dry psyllium with molasses and start with small amounts and build up to it for the first time until they get a taste for it, and then see if you can get them into it.
And do you put that in with the feed?
Yeah, so it has to be dry feed, right? Because again, if you wet it, it's just going to form that horrible kids' glue mess that it does. So it has to be a dry feed, but yes, just in there hard feed, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Cool. So feed-related diseases. So we've talked about sand, we've talked about colic. So what's the problem with our feed? So, that was a really nice slide. Damn. Okay. Anyway, so there's three main conditions that I want to talk about today. So laminitis and EMS, dental decay, and equine gastric ulcer syndrome. All of them are related to excessive non-structural carbohydrates, aka sugars, in their diet. Okay. So, what are non-structural carbohydrates? I will admit it took me an exceedingly too long a time to get in my brain the difference between structural and non-structural carbohydrates. Okay, so don't feel bad. So, structural carbohydrates are carbohydrates that are derived from the plant. I'm pressing buttons. From the plant cell wall. Okay, they need to be broken down by gut bacteria before they can be absorbed by the horse. And that main sugar is cellulose. Yeah, everybody's heard of cellulose, right? It's that thing that holds up the plant cell wall. Non-structural carbohydrates are directly absorbed by the body. So that's your glucose, sucrose, fructose, all of those. Okay? They're the ones that we need to avoid. So, let's have a look at some feed analysis. So, the three main common feeds that you'll get for horses is lucerne hay, oaten hay, and wheaten hay, right? It's probably the three main things you can get if the season's alright. So, if we look at the overall energy profile of these, lucerne hay sits at around 9 megajoules per kilogram of dry matter, oaten at 8, wheaten at 7. That's fairly similar, okay? There's not a big difference in overall energy of those. When we're talking about these sorts of plant feedstuffs, there's very little oil and fats in them. So it's primarily just protein and sugar, okay? So if we look at the protein breakdown, protein for lucerne sits at 15 of metabolizable energy per kilogram, 15%, oaten and wheaten at 3. Now, that means the rest of this energy has to be made up of sugar. Yeah? Everybody with me? So, for the same amount of energy, the cereal feeds are high sugar, low protein, right? Whereas your lucerne is the So this is why these are such a big risk factor, because to make up the same amount of energy, they're making it up with generally non-structural carbohydrates. So, forgot that button didn't work. Okay, so let's talk about laminitis and equine metabolic syndrome. So, anyone, what is laminitis? Hey, someone louder.
It's where the lemon eyes collapse, isn't it, due to something going on in the gut?
Okay, so very close, right? So laminitis is inflammation or itis of the lamellae. Okay, so the lamellae are what supports the hoof wall, supports the pedal bone against the hoof wall. Okay, they're like these interdigitating fingers. Okay, when you have inflammation of them, they will start to swell and then separate, and that becomes then rotation of the pedal bone. Okay, so there's just a little bit of terminology I want to clear up here. Is laminitis the same as founder?
No.
You went yes to start with, I saw it. So, you can have laminitis is founder, you can't have founder without laminitis. So what I mean by that is laminitis starts from the inflammation of the lamellae and goes all the way through to pedal bone separation and dropping and rupture through the foot, right? Founder is just rotation of the pedal bone. Okay? So you can't have founder without laminitis, but you can have laminitis without founder. Yeah, so it's just that little terminology thing. I'd rather people use laminitis, not founder. Okay? Founder is only once you've got rotation. So, yeah, that's totally gone. So, the old mechanism that we thought that created laminitis was you had a grain on sugar overload, okay? That created an overload of bacteria in the gut. They then ran out of energy and died off, and you had a toxic shock syndrome. Okay, has anybody heard that process of laminitis? A few nods? Yeah? Cool. We've thrown it out the window. Sorry. So the newer theory, and it's been around for like 10 years now, but the newer theory is that your sugar overload creates a direct insulin resistance. So it's all about insulin resistance, which is essentially like diabetes in people. Okay? So the issue is that when you have insulin resistance, the insulin then acts like a pro-inflammatory mediator. It changes the blood flow to the foot. You get impaired glucose penetration into the lamellae, which are always regenerating and changing because the hoof's always growing. And then you get your inflammation, which causes pressure and then separation of the feet. Okay? Who's heard of founder guard? Has it been?
No, it's
No.
not in Europe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So what's in it?
Antibiotics.
Yeah.
What's in it?
Fucking
Antibiotic.
daily dose antibiotic. Yeah, Virginiamycin. So the theory behind founder guard is that if we've got a bacterial overload, right, if we keep the bacteria controlled with antibiotics, we won't have laminitis, right? Well, that's lovely if it was a bacterial issue, but it's not. It's an insulin issue, right? So don't spend your money on founder guard, okay? Don't tell the bird that grows. I said that, but hey. I have an entire hour lecture just on laminitis, right? We're not going to go into the whole depths of the condition today, but enough to say that our non-structural carbohydrates are a high risk factor because they stimulate the insulin resistance. Okay. So, dental caries. So, this affects the cementum of the tooth. So, horse teeth are made up of 3 substances: enamel, dentine, and cementum. The cementum is present in 2 locations around the tooth. It's present around the outside and on the maxillary teeth or the upper teeth in the infundibulums. And I'll show you what that means in a second. Caries means decay. Okay, so when you hear peripheral cemental caries, that's decay around the outside of the tooth, or infundibular caries is decay of the infundibulums. Okay, so let's have a look at what that means. And fingers crossed these work. So this is an horoscope I took of a normal horse's mouth. There's a couple of sharp points and ulcers at the back, but these are essentially normal teeth. Okay?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, they're not normal.
Couple of ulcers, but that's normal. So what we're looking at here, so you can trace this white line around the tooth. Yeah? That's enamel. The creamy yellow stuff on the outside here and dentine, and then the secondary and primary dentines. That's overlying your pulse. Okay? So these are normal teeth. See if you can pick what's wrong with these. It gets better. That is infundibular caries. Okay? So this central portion here has been eaten away by oral decay and has literally got to the point of obliterating the structure of the tooth. Okay? So
How old was that horse?
it's a very good question, but this wasn't age related. It was I'm trying to remember which horse it was now. It wouldn't have been older than 15. So it was 10 to 15 range.
For 2 years when we moved here.
Sorry?
I fed my mare to meadow hay for 2 years.
Yep.
She was 14.
Yep.
Horrendous.
Yeah. So a good topic about meadow hay, which we'll probably cover later, but not all meadow hays are meadow hays, right? So I had this, it's a laminitis story, so it's somewhat pertinent. So I had this lovely older couple, right? They retired, they bought themselves a little hobby block. They were really sweet. And so they really wanted a Clydesdale, right? Because one of them had dealt with Clydesdales in the past. So they bought this Clydesdale. And they went, oh, like Clydesdale needs friends, right? So what did they buy? A Shetland.
Oh.
So we're trying to manage a Clydesdale and a Shetland together, right? It's just an ongoing nightmare. So this Shetland, of course, kept getting laminitis, right? And so I'd done insulin testing and we'd had it on medications and I'd discussed diet management and, you know, I'd said, well, you know, no open hay, definitely no open hay, yep. And it's on meadow hay. And anyway, this last little Shetland just wouldn't get sound. What is going on here? And finally I said, show me your meadow hay, right?
Rocket fuel.
So they took me off to this round bale, and I shit you not, like it was open hay, right? But because it was a 50-50 open meadow mix,
Oh.
the farmer could only sell it as meadow hay, right? But it had full oat seed heads in it, like it's like crack cocaine to this Shetland, right? So it's the worst thing. But they've gone to the fodder store and bought meadow hay because that's what it's been sold as. You do still have to be kind of critical of what you're getting, and even pasture hay can still have high sugar content, right? So some horses we do feel probably have a genetic predisposition to this. They have weak cementum that just seems to be prone to dissolving. But largely this is related to decay, so the acid producing. So this isn't necessarily painful like that, only if it's if it's exposed to the pulp before the tooth could recede away. So this is a fairly slow process generally. And so the tooth is able to adapt somewhat and able to pull the pulps away from the exposure. What this main problem is it puts this tooth at high risk of fracture. And then once you've got fractured teeth, you've got a good problem. Okay? So this next slide's probably not going to work. Sorry, so this is peripheral cemental caries. So infundibular was, if you use buttons at work, on the inside of the tooth, peripheral around the outside. Okay? So you can see a little bit of mostly normal cementum on this tooth, but then you can see all of these teeth, you're seeing the straight vertical edge of the enamel here, and you've only got a little rim of the cementum left at gum level. So you can really see that here. So this is the pitted enamel here, this is cementum. So this tooth's actually recovering because it's erupting out. But this is peripheral cemental caries. So the main problem with this is that when you lose the cementum from between the teeth, you then start to have food packing. That then rots further and creates more acid, and then you get gum disease, which is very, very painful. Gum disease is excruciatingly painful for horses. Okay? So that is something that has to be dealt with. So no, this doesn't really work. So the issue is we have oral bacteria plus non-structural carbohydrates, our sugars, that create fermentable acids. And the acid literally just dissolves that mineral cementum. Okay? So that's our main pathophysiology. Any questions on caries? Cool. So, last feed-related condition I'm going to talk about is equine gastric ulcer syndrome. So, this is your stomach. Who's seen this picture before? It's been around forever. Great. So, your stomach consists of two halves. The top half is what we call the squamous lining, and so that's a bit like skin. Okay, it's a pale pink colour. The bottom half is your glandular lining, and that's what produces your stomach acid. Okay, so we generally used to call it equine gastric ulcer syndrome, or EGUS. We now define it into two subcategories. So equine squamous gastric disease and equine glandular gastric disease. And the reason we now do that is because there's different risk factors for the different conditions and also different treatment protocols. So we have to make that slight definition. We can't just go, it's got ulcers. We have to kind of go, where's it got ulcers? Okay? Up to 50 to 90% of competing horses are at risk of developing gastric ulceration. Okay? And that's just done by studies of horses competing, getting scoped, and they've reported it's very high. So the normal glandular portion of the stomach produces hydrochloric acid to help break down food. Okay? But in a horse's normal environment and situation, the squamous lining is never exposed to high acid conditions for long periods of time. Okay? So, our main risk factors are, with feed related, it's high sugars. So again, just like the mouth, you've got sugars getting converted to acids, and then that's going to decrease the pH or make it more acidic in the stomach. Low fibre content. So fibre creates a physical barrier in the stomach and stops that sloshing of acid. And long intervals between feeding, so long periods of an empty stomach that's just full of stomach juice. Exercise related, it's generally around increasing our workload. So when I say that, it's not just in general, it's increasing the number of days you're exercising and increasing the length of your exercise periods. Okay? Not really the intensity. Okay? Intensity does somewhat affect the severity of the condition, but when we talk about it later, we're actually aiming to have shorter, more intense exercise periods is actually more protective than prolonged rides. Okay? So that's our MacBooks, don't get it. So as I said, your process here is that you've got your stomach bacteria, so instead of oral bacteria now we've got stomach bacteria. Add in our non-structural carbohydrate sugars, that then produces acid, and then that damages the lining of the stomach. So this is a grade 4 squamous ulceration case. Okay? A little bit difficult to say, is that painful? This horse was losing weight and looked like crap, and it was a standardbred that had travelled from over east and come over, and he was filling it full of lucerne, and it wasn't putting on weight and looked ratchet, and we scraped it, and that was the stomach. Unfortunately, there's been a few studies done to look at the pain associated with ulceration, and there's been no link between severity and pain. So the point is that every horse responds individually to ulceration. You can have ones with mild ulceration that act like they're dying, and you can have ones like this that just look a bit off. Okay? So pain is not a reliable indicator of ulceration. You kind of have to get them a scope to find out what's going on. So, that's all our problems. Okay? So, what can you do about it? What can you do about it? Right, so general feeding recommendations, right? Now, I mean, this is lifted straight from my training club lectures, right? So, normal quantity of feed for a horse is 1.5 to 2% of body weight. Okay, that's 7.5 to 10 kilos of feed a day for a standard 500 kilo horse. Okay? Ideally, you want 50 to 60% of that to be made up of roughage. Okay? So, roughage is of course lighter, so you need to feed more of it to make up the weight. Okay? Now, note, I'm always talking about weight. Yeah? So, I get a lot of times when I go, okay, let's talk about what you know, with horses got decay or...
Half a scoop.
Yeah, half a scoop, one dipper, one saucepan. Well, what bloody size saucepan? I don't know, do I, right? They're not standardised sizes, okay? There's 50 different dippers at every spotter store and they're all different, right? So what you've got to do is you've got to weigh it, right? Steal your kitchen scales, take them out to the shed, get your dipper and weigh one dipper of whatever your stuff is and just write on black text on the side, you know, one dipper is, you know, 600 grams of high gain zero, or it's 100 grams of chaff, or whatever, right? Just write it on the side. Then you can talk to me in weights, and then we can actually have a good discussion about what we're doing. Okay? We really want to split our hard feeds over several meals, as many as we can. Okay? To make sure we've got more consistent gut fill, and also decrease the amount of energy / sugars that we're presenting in one sitting at a time. Okay? The gold standard would be only 0.5% of body weight per feed. So that might be 4 feeds a day, 3 feeds a day, whatever it is, depending on how much you're feeding, but splitting it up as best you can. I know that's hard. I know we all have lives and day jobs and those sorts of things, but even if it's one before you go, one when you get home from work, and one before you go to bed, right? Just split these things up as best you can, all right? When you're restricted with the amount of hay you've got, if you try to ration out meadow hay or something like that, rather than just throwing a round bale out there and getting them all to stamp on it and piss and shit on it and waste it, stick it in your shed, either weigh it out or bag it out and portion it out, okay? Make it go that bit further without wastage, okay? Slow feeder hay nets, right? You've all seen them, heard of them, probably most of you use them. It's a great way to just slow down their intake so that it's prolonged over the day. Considering hay alternatives, so hay cubes or pellets are perfectly fine. Generally they're going to probably be imported either from over east or overseas because they're made more portable. Perfectly fine option. Obviously when using that or any sort of silage or haylage, just be a little bit critical around it, make sure it's not too dusty or mouldy, okay? So then we can start talking about botulism and bits and pieces and they're not fun. So hay alternatives are totally fine sources of long stem fibre. Bulk out your diets with other forms of fibre, so chaff, your beet pulps, your soy products, those sorts of things, totally fine to increase your fibre content. Again, it took my head a really long time to get around speedy beet and micro beet and those sorts of products. Hang on a second. I'm feeding sugar beet pulp to a horse that doesn't need sugar, right? It just didn't work in my brain, right? The point is that it's been processed for human production and they've drawn all the goodness, all the sugar out of it, right? All you're left with is cardboard, right? It's just fibre, so it's totally fine. Avoid feeding excessive high starch concentrates, so really avoid like whole grain cereals, so oats, wheats, barleys, those sorts of things, even if they're cracked, steamed, boiled, whatever. And consider alternative sources of energy, so fats and oils, so vegetable oil, totally fine source of energy. A cup of vegetable oil in a horse's diet is actually going to be quite a high energy source to add.
Just on your pelletised hay,
Yes?
is there seed in that that's live seed?
Possibly. You'd have to ask the manufacturers,
Yeah.
the individual producers.
Yeah, that's what you guys know.
Yeah, I mean, I've never sat down and pulled it apart to see if there's whole seeds in it. My thought would probably be that it's probably been milled past the point of viability.
Yeah.
But I certainly wouldn't rule it out that you'd have to be considerate of that if you don't want, mixed growth coming up on your property.
To get it into Western Australia though, it'd have to pass the,
It has to be radiated.
Yeah, I mean, if it's international, definitely. If it's interstate,
Still has to be irradiated.
right, okay.
Yep.
So you've got some assurance, some checks and balances there. But again, if you are concerned about introducing weeds or other pastures onto your place, then those are the sorts of instances where you're feeding on mats and carpets and bits and pieces like that, and you're collecting up any droppings and that sort of stuff, and actually, putting it in your compost heap or manure heap or something like that. It's going to be more work, but if it's all you can get, it may be what you have to do. Okay. So specific conditions. So we're going to want to manage our known or at-risk conditions. So if you've got a horse that is a known sand accumulator or at risk, and unfortunately anything between the coast and the hills here in WA is at risk because it's just all sand flats, right? So, okay. So as I said, the product that we recommend is in sand out if they'll eat it. Plain dry psyllium is really the goal, but it's really unpalatable. But see how you go. So you can start with a small quantity from your supermarket or health food shop or whatever to see if your horse will eat it, and then buy it in bulk if they will. If not, try some of the pelleted versions. If sand flush or sand expel is all that your horse will eat, totally fine, but ignore the feeding recommendations on the tub. You have to feed extra.
When you were talking about molasses before, would you just put it in their feed bin, you weigh out your portion of silver husks, make it into a paste and just go and have at it, and get molasses, just like eat it and fill up, like a psyllium,
Yeah, so,
or in a thing?
well, no, still in a feed usually. I mean, some horses so there was a product that came out and actually it was developed by a vet nurse who I used to work with. Her name was Sandy, ironically. She had a product called Brit-Bix. Anybody ever heard of Brit-Bix?
oh yeah.
Yeah, it was a fantastic product. And then I think she had some life traumas and she stopped producing it, pretty sadly. So she was actually making whole psyllium bricks and they were bound with low GI molasses and electrolytes to make them palatable. And generally for the first couple of days you could break them up in their feed and they'd eat it really well, and then from then on you could literally just throw it in their feed bin like a solid and they just sit there and eat it. It was fantastic. So basically I would make their hard feed, put on the psyllium, mix it through a bit, and then add my molasses, which would be, a quarter of a cup or something like that. And then it's just to make it more palatable, make it more enticing for them to eat the whole feed, and a little bit sticky, right? So it's going to bind the psyllium a little bit, so that they're not just sifting it out. Because it's amazing. You can feed them a hard feed with chaff pellets and psyllium, and you'll come back to just the psyllium at the bottom. And you mix that through thoroughly, right? And you go, they've just sat there with that beautiful top muzzle lip, and they've just jiggled the feed, and it just settles out. Yeah. So just try and mix it up a bit. Yes.
I think that's answered my question. One of my horses is a little bit prone to choke, so you can't mix it with water then.
Nope. Definitely.
So mixing it with molasses will kind of make sure that's okay as well.
Yeah. So choke's a pain in the butt. The biggest cause of choke for us is carrots. So be careful of that 2 ton of carrots out there. You're going to make your vet very happy, right? So they crunch off a perfect round and it gets in the esophagus and then it just stops, right? I prefer them to be sliced or something like that into their feed because then they're thin slices, so they tend to grind them up more than having chunks taken off. Also, worth taking some carrots, do a carrot test on your older horses and just see if they might have EOTRH. Sorry, that's a bit of an aside that I didn't think about until now. Equine odontoclastic tooth resorption and hypersegmentosis. Basically, if they don't want to snap a carrot, talk to your dental vet. Anyway, sorry, that's off topic. So, psyllium husk for sand, try and get it into them. I know it's a pain in the butt, but you really don't want to spend $2,000 to be in hospital for a week getting twice daily drenched x-ray. Okay. Caries, so soaking your cereal haze can be very beneficial. So what did I say about the non-structural carbohydrates? What defines them from structurals? Readily absorbed, which also means they're readily dissolved. So if you soak your hay, it dissolves out the non-structural carbohydrates. Key step to that is to dry the hay. Don't just soak it and then feed it. So all you've done is soak it from the inside to the outside. Have a drying step. Okay. Dental decay, flushing the mouth just with water can be very helpful. And also I tend to add calcium carbonate to their diet. So a couple of tablespoons just of cheap calcium carbonate from the stock feeder. So that is going to help balance the mineral deficit that you're getting with the acid dissolution. Equine gastric ulcer syndrome. So again, we need to reduce the total non-structural carbohydrates in the diet but still maintain their energy and fibre content. So in terms of their feeding, you still want to have hay in their diet, and so feed whatever you can. With exercise, so we want to exercise in the afternoon or feed hay prior. Has anybody seen our video on Facebook that we did? It's on our Facebook page. Check it out. I might find it in the break and then I can play it for you guys. I thought about it on the way down. Maybe I should put that in. So have a bit of a play at home. Get a bucket of water, put a couple of handfuls of chaff in it, slosh it around. What does it do?
Float.
Yeah, it sits at the top and it sloshes around, right? Take a couple of handfuls of hay, smush that down on top of the water, now slosh it around. What does it do?
It sits there.
Sits there as a mat, right? Well, that's what's happening in your horse's stomach, right? A chaff feed prior to feeding isn't doing anything to act as a physical barrier in the stomach. You want to feed some hay prior to, or alternatively, ride them in the afternoon when they've been grazing all morning. Okay, and then they've got food.
Sorry, just say that last bit then. Ride in the afternoon what?
Right in the afternoon when they've been grazing all morning.
Yeah.
So
That's
they've got
okay,
a
that's
physical
fine.
barrier,
Yeah.
right? So that's going to be better than nothing, okay? High intensity interval training is really good. So doing short spurts of high intensity is okay. And then deep focusing on quality of work, not quantity, okay? So an hour trail ride is just as risky as an hour in the arena, okay? It's the duration, not the intensity by and large. So, it's better to do 20 minutes of quality work and call it a day than go for 2 hours just because you want to achieve one thing and then you've actually probably stressed at the same time. So nutraceuticals, so there is a ton of them on the market for equine gastric ulcer syndrome. There's two that have evidence base. One is choledogastroid recovery, and the other is the KER sucralox. The sucralox is quite expensive, but that's because it's actually got sucralfate in it, which is a gastric binder, so it will actually coat any exposed ulceration. So the choledogastroid recovery is probably more common. Either are written on our gastroscope reports as recommendations, so either of those are fine. There's digestive EQs and the inside outs and all of those sort of things. Most of those are just probiotics. If you look at what's in the back, that's all it is. Okay. So these are the products that we recommend. Laminitis is a big one, right? That is so diet related, it's just not funny. So again, it's the same as ulcers. You want to reduce the non-structural carbohydrate in the diet while still giving them the fibre and energy that they need. So soaking hay is extremely useful, especially if you can only get cereals. I'll tend to have 3 buckets going. 1 soaking, 1 drying, 1 ready to feed. Okay, and then I just keep that process going through. And 12 hours for me is fine. So in the morning, soak 1 goes to dry 1 gets fed, put 1 12 hours later, repeat the process. That's totally fine for me. Okay. So low sugar bulkers, so your Speedy Beet, Microbeat, Maxi Soy, all totally fine options to increase the fibre content to the diet. And then concentrate feeds are really, really useful. Again, there's a myriad of them on the market. So you've got your high gain Metasafe, Zero in ice. Metasafe is an even newer one. You've got your Mitavite Munga and Pride's Easy Sport. Now, Pride's Easy Sport is designed for ulcer horses, but we're achieving the same goal. It's totally fine for laminitis horses, if that's what you can get. But there's also a product produced by Genequine called All 4 Feet. And this is a fantastic product. So it's designed by a veterinarian who's literally done her PhD in nutrition, and she started a feed company. And she's produced this product, and it's kind of like the dog biscuits of the horse world. So this is designed as an entire complete diet. You just add some fibre. Okay. It's got full energy and mineral balance that your horse needs, and it's designed for horses that have musculoskeletal issues. So laminitis. She lives in a high oxalate area, so they get a big head as well. So this is a fantastic product. It's very economical. You don't have to feed a lot of it. So a little bit of it goes a long way. So I encourage you to have a look at that and have a think about it. So obviously with these specific conditions, you always want to make sure that they've been diagnosed and treated by your vet first before you start any home remedies. Okay? Have a chat with us about what you're worried about and what you want to do. Okay? We're more than happy to discuss it with you. Most of the time we're not selling most of this stuff, right? So it doesn't affect us what you buy. We're going to give you honest recommendations on what we think is going to work. Okay? But make sure your horses have been properly checked first. That's me. On time. Any questions?
Would you want your horse to be have an X-ray and have to be seen to have sand before you give them some tusk? Would you use that as a preventative?
No, so we then use it preventatively, right? There's totally no issue with that at all. So, you know, pretty much all of the properties up our way are at-risk properties. So I've got no issue with using psyllium preventatively in that scenario.
Would you have to keep to the 1 week on, 3 weeks off, or could you extend them?
In normal years, we'll generally only do monthly over the dry season, so over sort of late spring through to early autumn. We don't tend to do it all year round. But I mean, this year we didn't have our first rains till June, right? It's the first month of winter. Like, that's just bonkers. So, you know, on a year like this, you would keep going probably until now, until we've actually got some pasture growth. But even then, we've hit the cold period, so we're not getting a lot of pasture growth, right? So, especially if you've got a known sand accumulator, I would just be doing the monthly, and it's not going to hurt them. And there's really no downside except to get popping for it. Yeah. All right. Yes?
We just had a horse at our register with Coy,
Yep.
and the vet came out and dredged her 3 times for 3 days, but she also recommended that we all get all our horses drenched 3 times for 3 days. What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's not wrong. It's just not all of your horses are necessarily indicated for that, right? So what we have done with large adjustment centres that have been keen to do some screening is we've come and we've done auscultations of all the horses, and then either those that we've heard sand or are at risk, so ones that might be scouring or look a bit poorly or anything like that, we've then sand x-rayed on, and then we've only drenched the ones that have had sand on x-rays. So I prefer to add a little bit of science to it where we can. A little bit of evidence-based is nice.
Yes, probably go with the psyllium cost.
Yeah, so if your horses aren't showing clinical signs, psyllium is fine. The one caveat to psyllium is if your horse does have a large sand burden and you start psyllium, it may colic. Okay? So if it does, it's probably got sand and it's going to need to be getting drenched for that. What happens is because this tends to accumulate over a long period of time, horses sort of adjust to it and cope to it to a certain degree. When you add in the psyllium, that then emulsifies it and starts moving it. Now you're sandpapering all the intestines, right? So that can be uncomfortable. So just be aware of that and just know that, okay, that horse probably now needs to go on a drenching regime. But even then, our recommendation is to x-ray because you don't know how much is in there, right? And a little bit of sand can cause colic, a lot can cause colic. So 3 drenches might not be enough. You know, we've seen these horses that are taking 5 to 7 days just to get it to a manageable level. So add a little bit of science. Yeah, I'll do this one first.
Does it, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
Does it affect their way of going if they've got a sand burn? Does it affect
It can,
their
yeah.
places?
A bit like ulcers have different pain responses with different horses, sand also has different pain responses in different horses. But if you can imagine you've got 10 kilos of sand sitting in your gut, you're not really wanting to become collected and have good impulsion and move forward, right? Because that's heavy and uncomfortable. So definitely, again, it's not just full-on colic and scours. If you've got poor performance and weight loss, I'm going to investigate sand as an option in those horses.
How long had it been with King, like his previous drench, before he was?
I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. It would have been probably more than 6 months.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Only accumulated that much?
Yeah. It doesn't take long to accumulate that much. Yeah.
But you did say as well that drenching doesn't.
One drench probably wouldn't
No.
fit it. No.
Yeah.
So there could have been some before that and it didn't fit all of it, absolutely. And that's kind of my point, right? One drench is just not touching the sides of that, right?
Yeah.
And that could have been there for some time. But yeah.
How many views do you have to take to how many x-rays?
So we charge 200 for sand x-rays. It's way cheaper than our normal standard series of x-rays, right? So we normally charge, don't quote me, 450 to 500 for a standard joint, so 4 views. We're doing 3 to 4 views for a sand x-ray, so we're actually doing a discount for you. But we want to do it evidence-based, right? We don't just want to be blanket drenching everything. So yeah, generally the first view we go, "Whoa, this is a good one," or not so much in there. But we generally takes us 3 to 4 views to cover. So we're doing it from the sternum up to the groin. Yeah.
So 2 horses that are, one's 10, one's 15, fat, healthy, never had colic, never had anything, run around in the paddock, eat grass all the time.
Yep.
We've always got grass. Would it be worth me just taking them
No.
to you guys, pay the $200, get them scanned?
Yeah.
Like
So
I said,
it's-
I've never been sick in my whole life, but I've never done much, do a bit of riding, but
Okay.
I've never been cooked. So
I'm going to ask 2 things here, right? So my first one is, I'm really sorry, I'm going to be a little bit mean now, okay? When horse owners wear the badge of honour that my horse has never seen a vet, really irks us, right? I hate to say it, but that's not actually good management. There's a lot of routine stuff that needs to be done on a regular basis. Going, oh, my horse has never seen a vet in its 15 years of life, I'm sorry, it's not a badge of honour, okay? I'm not having a go. That's what's going through your vet's head. They're going, oh, well, actually, when was its teeth done? When was it vaccinated? Have we checked it? Bloods, blah, blah. Anyway, those are low-risk horses, right? And so, I did a property yesterday. I went to a dental, right? And I just remarked at this property. It's an adjustment place, but they've got big paddocks. They're all pasture improved, so they're seeded, they're fertilised, they're sprayed. They've had pasture cover the whole way through summer. And they're just not even worried about sand there. And I get it, I'm not worried either. like some peace of mind, absolutely, right? Sand x-rays are definitive. You know whether there is mineral there or not. We can't really miss it. There is a distinct difference between normal gut ingesta organs and mineral dense sand. So we'll see it if it's there, and then you know,
And
right?
nothing, is it different, the sand up north where we come from is red, is the sand down here going to make a difference, so no, still going to sit there, guts do the same things?
So Sandy, the vet nurse who made Gripix, she had been playing around with psyllium for years, and she's like, it's amazing what horses have in their gut. So when she'd been doing her psyllium trials, she's like, I've found baling twine, bits of clay pot. She said, I've found black sand when they haven't been on river sand for 5 years, and it's obviously just sat in there. Horse guts are just amazing at sifting this crap out. So yeah, if you want to, peace of mind, absolutely just get it done, right? And then you can go, well, look, I know my management practices are working, I probably don't have to worry about this particular preventative program on my property, right? Absolutely.
And their stomachs don't have to be empty like when you do your ulcer.
No, because again, we're not doing the stomach, right? We're x-raying the large intestine, which sits dependently in the gut. So we know you don't have to worry about that with the stomach. Interestingly, so, really cool x-rays I should show you at some stage, but we had a horse come in, we thought it might be sand, we took x-rays, we found wire in it.
Yep.
Wire in it. And we thought it was in the stomach, right? So we fasted this horse and we scoped it and we're x-raying it, we're going, oh, can't see our scope on the x-ray now, so where the bloody hell is this wire? And we brought our x-ray up and oh yeah, there's the scope, so not in the stomach. It made its way through to the large intestine and was mixed into sand, it was sitting in sand, and it had wire in its gut. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, pretty cool.
So how often would dental care?
Very good question, anyone know? Okay. I'm not getting a very good answer here,
What
Steve.
isn't it about every 6 months for the first few years and then you can go to 12 months?
So, what is the big difference between our teeth and horse teeth?
Continue to grow.
Very close, they continue to erupt.
Yeah.
Okay? So they've got that whole tooth in their head. It's about that long when they're fully mature. Okay? So they've got that whole tooth in their head, but as they grind on the surface of the tooth and that wears away, the tooth erupts up out of the gum. Okay? So their teeth are always changing throughout their life. So, for an adult horse with a full mouth of teeth, we generally say 12 months.
Yeah.
It's not because that's how often I want to make money off you, right? It's because if I smooth the sharp enamel points off now, it takes around 12 months for those to reform to the point of creating cheek ulceration. Okay? So for an adult horse of say 6 to 12 to 15, once a year is generally fine if they don't have any other problems. Okay? Young horses, up to the age of 6, every 6 months they've got something happening. One of their caps is being removed, one of their permanent teeth is coming through, and we want to make sure that those are happening properly, that you're not getting retained caps and displaced teeth and all of these other sorts of problems that can go on. Okay? So up to 6 every 6 months to make sure things are going normally. 6 to mid-teens, once a year should be fine, and then after that your dental vet will determine what you need, but generally when they start to get to the 18 to 20, they may need to see every 6 months.
Just a quick one, meadow hay.
Yes.
We grow our own ryegrass with clover.
Yep.
So you're talking about sugars.
Yep.
Is there an issue with ryegrass itself?
No, ryegrass, ryegrass has its other issues with your annual perennials and getting it tested, obviously, which I'm sure you'd be doing that anyway. And you can buy the, I never remember, there's the nematode one, which is annual or perennial, and then there's the other one, the fungus one, right?
Yeah.
So you can buy seeds that are resistant for those if you are thinking of seeding your pastures. But generally ryegrass is okay. It's more towards the end of your, like it's heading towards your teff and your triticales than it is your true barley, oat, wheat cereals. So it's usually not too bad in terms of sugar. And of course your clover is legume, so it's high protein, proportion low sugar. So that would be fine for me.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yes?
Can I just ask quickly?
Yeah.
What do you think about teff hair?
Yeah, so teff's fine. Yep, so it's theoretically lower sugar. The only weird caveat to teff is if you're doing any performance that may be you're doing any sort of high performance work, just consider that. But TEF is great if you can get it.
It's
Absolutely.
good for line, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, team, for having me.